Hello, my name is Kaylee, and I'm here again today with Gabby. We are the outreach advocates at Advocates Against Family Violence. This is part 3 of our series for managing stress during COVID-19. Today, we are speaking to teachers, educators, coaches, and supportive adults on ways that you can help young folks manage stress during this time.
And we understand the pandemic has caused much stress and uncertainty for families, students, and school staff. These are our objectives we intend to cover today in our presentation. 1, to identify stress management tools to share with students and families. 2, to create safe spaces for students to connect with peers and trusted adults in classroom settings. And 3, to develop activities that support students in recognizing and managing their stress.
So before we get into our different tips and tools for helping young people manage stress, we always like to talk a little bit about trauma and how trauma impacts the brain. Right now, during this pandemic, all of us are experiencing some level of trauma, but this can be especially amplified for young people whose brains are still developing. So a piece of research that we really like to share is a study called ACEs, which was done through Kaiser and the CDC. And what this study showed was that the more a young person experiences childhood trauma, the higher at risk they are for things like social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, adoption of at-risk behaviors, disease, disability, and social problems, and then at the very top of that pyramid that you'll see on the right, early death. So this research is really important because it shows that when young folks experience adversity, it does impact the way their brain develops and how they move through the world. This also helps us understand young folks' behaviors and also helps us give them tools to manage that stress and build what we call resiliency. And resiliency is the part of that research that helps the brain cope and armor up against those effects of ACEs. We included a video in this presentation that we're going to link in our description that you can watch. It really summarizes this research really well. On the left, there's a picture of the brain where we have the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. I like to call these two different parts of the brain the thinking brain versus the emotional brain or versus the feeling brain. We need both parts of our brain to make rational and thoughtful decisions, but when fight, flight, or freeze is initiated, the emotional brain takes over. So fight, flight, or freeze is the trauma response that somebody might have to an event that causes extreme stress in the body. This is where you're going to see trauma reactions. When a child experiences stress and their fight, flight, or freeze response is consistently being activated, you might notice changes in behavior. This can sometimes look like what we call problem behaviors, such as sleeping in class, becoming irritable, yelling, acting out with violence, or other disruptive behaviors. But it's really important to recognize that these behaviors are a trauma response instead of labeling them as defiance. That way you can respond in a way that builds trust and resiliency. So during this pandemic, we are seeing an increase in traumatic stress, not just in children, but in families in general. We're also seeing that young folks are more at risk for child abuse and neglect because they might be at home with their abusers and they're not in safe spaces where they can kind of talk about what's going on in their life. So some of those safe adults that are in their life, they might not have access to them because we're all at home right now. This can really impact their brain development and their behavior.
So the priority here is connection, community, and support, because we believe that connection is greater than corona. Mental health is going to be a vital part of the way schools will help support their students in this upcoming school year, whether their classes are being held in person or online or half and half. prioritizing the mental health needs of your students first, then focus on academics. Social emotional learning, or SEL for short, should be a priority for students during COVID-19. With new challenges and uncertainty, consider the fact that many students could be experiencing heightened levels of stress and trauma, as we mentioned in the previous slide. Safe, trusted adults need to help students reconnect and feel safe with peers and other trusted adults more than ever. It's understandable that you want to get right back to learning and make up for the lost time, but it's impossible to expect student learning to happen without first caring about their mental well-being. In order for classes to resume effectively in the upcoming school year, some education professionals say that they, meaning teachers, should focus on student social emotional learning, or SEL, before trying to make up for learning loss. Students need to feel safe before they can learn. You might think that social emotional learning isn't that important, but students do need to feel safe before they can learn. We believe their ability to manage their emotions and develop good coping skills is important now during the pandemic. This is a chart that we found. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a concept you're more than likely already aware of. I don't have to explain it to you, but here's an example we want to show you that we like of how you can apply it now during this COVID time as a guide to support your students. It's tiered in 5 levels, as you can see. Down in the first level, educators and other supportive adults should first of all make sure that students' basic needs are met, right? Are they safe and fed? They can't be expected to learn if they're worried about not having dinner that night or living in an unsafe environment. If you need help in this area, reach out to us or other support in your community. On the second level, students need to feel emotionally connected to their teachers and each other during this pandemic, because many of them could be experiencing some trauma, fear, or anxiety. They need to know they are loved and appreciated. Then when you look at the third level, recognize the emotions that your students may be experiencing, and those emotions are normal, but how well are they able to cope with those? Do they have these skills? Providing them with some tools, which we'll show you later in this presentation, to regulate and process some of their emotions will help them develop some of these coping skills. And then next you have the fourth level, with some schools moving from conventional classroom settings to part-time or full-time remote learning platforms. It's important for students to have access to the instruction materials they need. Ask yourself, do they have adequate Wi-Fi connections? Do they have a computer or tablet to complete their lessons? Can they afford their school books if they need it? Figuring this stuff out will require input and collaboration from parents and families. And then for the last level, the fifth one, we assume your students have met all the needs of the 4 previous levels. So now they're ready to begin their learning. Students will be ready to focus, and you won't have to reteach the same material over again for them to learn it if they have met all of the requirements in the 5 tiers.
So we have a few tools for you that we're going to talk about today that can help you help your students manage stress, identify stress and their feelings, and cope with everything that's happening at this time. So the goal in using the first tool is for students to identify what they're feeling as part of their self-awareness, which can help them build the skill called self-regulation. It can also help them communicate to you what they need. So a couple of activities that you can try with your students to help them identify their feelings is a feel it in your body activity, where you draw an outline of a human body, or you have them draw an outline of a human body. And then inside that outline, they label where they're feeling stress or anxiety or sadness or anger. You can kind of prompt them with an emotion. You can say, okay, the emotion is anger, so tell me where in your body you feel anger. Is it your heartbeat? Is it your hands? Do you get a stomach ache? So helping them identify how their body is feeling in relation to those emotions. Another option is to check out the First Aid for Feelings workbook, which is specifically created for COVID-19. It's available for free download, and we will provide the website where you can download this at. And it's also available in Spanish, and it has different activities on helping young folks identify their feelings.
Yeah, our second tool for you is emotional regulation that you can try in your classrooms.
So for emotional regulation, we have a feelings game where you write down a bunch of different emotions. So things like excitement, fear, anxiety, stress. You could put depression, supported. So you want to have a good mix of positive emotions and then also harder emotions. And you put those in a jar or in a hat, and you have them pick out of that jar or hat and answer the question, a time I felt blank is when. So with whatever emotion they pull out of the hat, they talk about a time where they felt that emotion, and they share that with the class. If you're doing distance learning, this is totally possible. You can put up like a word bank of different emotions and call on different students and give them a random emotion to think of a scenario with. For some other coping skills, you can try deep breathing exercises. So a couple that we like to do is breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and breathe out for 4 to help monitor our heart rate and to help our nervous system calm down. And then also engaging our 5 senses. So 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we can hear, 2 things we can taste, and then wrap that up with some deep breathing as well. If you are distance learning, you can also just take a couple minutes out of each lesson to breathe deeply or to practice the 5 senses technique. And then the last one that we have is physical space to withdraw in a classroom. So that can be like a corner, a desk, a floor, a wall, or a poster in the room. The really important thing to do when identifying this space is to include your students in creating that space. So creating that calm space where you can go to just have a few minutes to withdraw if need be. And again, if you are distance learning, this can be just a time that you set aside each class to take a break, get a drink of water, have some deep breaths, things like that.
Our third tool is giving them a space to check in. This will be an outlet for your students to help reestablish a sense of security and routine. You can be really creative with this one.
Yeah, so this is probably my favorite one. Whenever we are teaching healthy relationships in the schools or working in support groups with young folks, we always like to start our lesson or our group off with an open-ended question about well-being. So this could be like in the form of morning meetings or minute meetings, whatever works with your schedule in your classroom, just to check in with all of your students in a simple way and monitor their social and emotional well-being. So if you're using an online platform, consider virtual check-ins and scheduled periods throughout the week or even daily. Make sure you're using open-ended questions to see how they're doing and take note of their levels of stress and how they are managing that. Then try to follow up with some support if they feel safe or if it's needed. So some example questions might be, tell me about a feeling you had yesterday evening, or tell me where you're at on a scale of 1 to 5 today. They can also be really simple questions like, talk to me about a time where you felt joy, or tell us a story about a time where you felt safe. So they can be positive, and they can also be looking to identify stress or depression or anxiety. Another option for young learners is a story time to prompt discussion. There are plenty of free books available about the pandemic for children, and we will provide those resources where you can look for those books. And then you can also start with a self-check-in. So just starting each day with an easy check-in question, like give me 2 words to describe your day today. Whenever we do the 2 words to describe your day check-in question, we always tell folks that those 2 words don't have to be the same. So you can say, today I'm feeling anxious, but I'm also feeling happy, because you can feel 2 things at once and both things can be true. Make sure that when you're doing check-in questions, you're modeling those check-in questions so that you answer it first before you expect them to open up and answer with each other or with you.
Here are a couple of creative ideas for students to check in with adults about what they're feeling at a particular moment. There are plenty of great examples out there, but we decided to pick out these 2 ideas for you. The one on the left side, as you can see, is a mental health chart created by a teacher in California. Basically, you grab a you have the students grab a Post-it and write their names on the back, and on the front, they would write down what they're feeling and then place it on the chart that resembles what they're feeling. It's a great idea. The second one on the right side is a simple color chart designed as a feelings check-in, which is also very great. They're both simple examples, but they're effective. Social and emotional well-being doesn't stop with just the students. You've likely experienced or are experiencing your own added levels of stress and anxiety at this moment. You recognize you're navigating uncharted territory right now. You don't know what the upcoming school year will look like. You have to adapt to new challenges and transition from your conventional classroom settings. All of this may be causing mixed emotions for you. So practicing self-care is essential for your own overall well-being right now. So we put together this bonus slide for you, self-care tips. Here are 3 ideas you can try. First, with so much uncertainty, it's easy to become anxious and worry. So to help put things into a healthy perspective, consider making a T-chart. It's a simple 2-column chart where you write down what is in your control on one column and what isn't in your control on the other column. And allow yourself to be vulnerable and acknowledge what you can and can't do. It's okay. This is a new learning experience for everyone. Secondly, look at the positives. Don't forget to acknowledge those everyday moments of joy and gratitude. Maybe write down some things that made you smile that day. Express gratitude to those around you. Also, you can try to identify what you and your school strengths already are and build on those. These moments of connections with yourself and others can be really helpful in the midst of our current circumstances. And thirdly, stay connected with healthy support. These connections are important for your overall well-being so that you don't experience what we call compassion fatigue and/or vicarious trauma in the process of supporting your students. Take care of yourself by staying connected. Encourage your staff to take care of themselves and check in on your colleagues regularly. Show empathy, normalize this help-seeking behavior in your school. Be open and honest about your concerns and make sure to also practice active listening. Remember, it's understandable for you to feel overwhelmed. Recognize your own trauma that you've experienced and allow yourself to cope with your own anxieties and practice ways to regulate your own emotions.
So before we leave you today, we want to provide some local resources that can help you as well as your students, and for you to be able to share with the families that you work with and serve. So the first one is Idaho Federations of Families. They're a great resource for parent support groups and best practices for responding to trauma and providing care for mental health barriers. There's also the Idaho COVID-19 hotline, which offers information on local in-person and telehealth counseling. They also provide more information about the ACEs research and tools and practices for organizations that are using their programs to build healthy support systems and resiliency. There's also our information. So we have myself, I'm our outreach coordinator. You can email me. We have our counselor, and then we also have our emergency shelter number. And then the Idaho Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence also has best practices for helping folks who have experienced domestic or sexual violence in their lives. They do a lot of work for our community, and they can also connect you with organizations throughout the community for victims of abuse. And then our Idaho Children's Trust Fund has a series on YouTube called Hope Conquers ACEs, where they go through different activities that help young folks and families build resilience. So if you have any questions for us, you can send an email to kaylee@aafehope.org. We will also link all of our sources and resources in the notes for this video. And if you're interested in learning more or having our youth outreach program talk about healthy relationships with your students during the fall or spring semester, you can also send me an email and we can talk about what that looks like moving forward through COVID-19. We hope we have a great day.
Thank you.